order to really indulge in this conversation that we're having, right, there's got to be some level of curiosity because the ego has such a strong hold on us. The beliefs that we formed, the personality parts that we formed, and when you say there's a part of you that knows, like, yes, there's always a part of us that knows, but particularly, I think if you're not on this journey, like that part is nowhere to be found. And if you're not curious to look for it, and it's okay, but I guess the end point is that you suffer more than you need to. And then there becomes a sort of you fall on the sword of suffering in a way, and then you unite around suffering. And, I mean, to me, the only reason that I care about that is I just don't want you to suffer. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line. And then that feels, but that can feel minimizing to the person who feels like, no, wait a minute, like we are, everything is going to hell in a handbasket. So how can you not suffer? In fact, by you not suffering, you're a horrible person.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way the mind works. It attaches lots of guilt and it makes you feel like, well, who are you to be happy? With all these people suffering and it's funny. I was at a local health food store a few days ago and there was a 16-month-old kind of hanging out. And it was just so wonderful to play with them and just, have some fun. And, these games where they drop things and you pick it up and they can do that. We just had some fun with that. And you recognize like we all had that no mind state at some point. And, when we all get together and we debate and argue, if we're lucky enough to have these kinds of conversations, you wonder what the mind of that infant, they just hear a bunch of noises. They're sitting there in the perfect Zen mind. So we came into this world perfect Zen masters. Language didn't mean anything. Words were meaningless. And almost always we had fun and playful. And so this mind thing that's it's such a difficult trick to get out of, it was taught to us. It was taught to us by other minds that took the world very seriously. And so because it was taught to us, it's something that we can unlearn. It's probably the challenge. And the mind has, and this is one of the things, again, it wasn't from having a PhD in cognitive psychology. That didn't really help me much. It helped me with the brain areas but the basic insights of how the mind works. And that came from direct experience. And sometimes we get pretty peaceful and we notice this. And then the mind has this. So in the Neurotics Guide, I wrote something like, the closest point to enlightenment is also the furthest. Because when we do start to settle the mind and we have these moments of peace, the mind has this built-in mechanism that reestablishes itself. So we can have these moments, and I've had so many people I've worked with, and they'll find these very calm states, and then all of a sudden they'll text me and, oh, it's all a mess again. I'm like, yeah, the mind's reestablishing itself, and it does it through its two basic, anxiety and fear, and so that's its favorites. The mind would rather exist and create suffering than to see that it's just an illusion and that it's all gone. So there's a lot that's part of the process. And to me, it's something that when working your way up the mountain, there's so many different paths you can take, but there are some regularities. And I love Eckart's teachings, everything about, but in a way, and I'm sure certain he didn't mean to do this, but he kind of set us up in a bad way. If you read the beginning of The Power Now, here he is, absolutely neurotic, suffering to the highest extent that maybe even worse than I was suffering, and just wakes up one morning in the now. He wakes up, it's perfect peace. It never shattered. It never was, ruffled. It was perfect. And what that did is it gave us the spiritual carrot to chase. Like, what can I do that will turn the switch from suffering to peace?
Like Buddha too, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it happens all of a sudden, but that's not how it happens.
I agree 100%. I mean, maybe it does for some people, but I think a lot of us ordinary people. So I had insights and then I had setbacks and then I had insights and then I had setback. And so I really think, so maybe you really are thinking, this peace thing, I am curious. Maybe there is something other than suffering. But I would suggest there's no switch that's going to turn it from suffering to absolute peace. And that's why in the workbook, I so suggested at the beginning, like this, the small little steps. Don't worry about enlightenment. You know, don't
Yeah.
worry about, don't worry about, you hear that this, and Eckert really does seem, you know, he's in a very interesting place. And it doesn't, I don't think, like if I went up and yelled at Eckert and called him names, I doubt it would phase him.
Yeah.
But what there's a strange, when we look at that as the goal, then there's all these paradoxes. We start focusing on the goal, and then of course, what? I think we were talking about this last time, where the mind wants what it can't have, its absence. And that's this it you know one of the ways I look at it is the mind is kind of like this neighbor that moves in, and you're never going to get rid of them. so but they're not you. They're not, and you don't have control over it. And so they're going to do these things that they do, and they may play their music all night, and that may really annoy you. But there's just some basics, like the recognition it's not you, the recognition you can't control it.